Okay, so today I have the brilliant Anna Parker-Naples, who I'm super excited to be talking to. And Anna and I met, gosh, probably about 3 years ago now, I think, at an award ceremony where our businesses were in totally different places. In fact, I think we were almost running completely different businesses to what we are running now. And so we're going to be delving into a little bit on Anna's journey, where she's come from, but also the importance of visibility within our businesses and the importance of podcasting in that, because Anna is also known as the Podcast Queen. So Anna, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, it's so nuts, Sarah, to hear you talking about like when we first met and we had completely different businesses. Same intentions for ourselves, I think, behind why we were running the businesses, but it just goes to show how much things can change and you don't notice when you're in it. You don't notice the little minute changes, but then you look back and 3 years later, we're in different spaces, known for different things. And that's exciting because I think it shows anyone who's listening what's possible. It's not that far away to make the difference that you want to make.
Absolutely. And just even little changes, that compound effect that you can have by making little steps, little
Yeah.
tweaks. Suddenly months disappear, years disappear, and actually you can have amazing results off the back of that. But you don't have to wait for 3 years to have those results, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's that compound effect of, small actions are just as useful as big actions.
I think so. And both you and I come from the same place. If we don't want to wait forever for our businesses to become successful, and unfortunately in the online space, the way that things work, you don't have to. You don't have to wait forever if you're committed to visibility and showing up. And that's really something I'm very, very passionate about helping people realize, because I think many people hold themselves back through fear of how, what's everyone going to think if I talk about my business on social media? But that is the way. And both of us have built incredible networks and opportunities for ourselves because we've shown up.
Yeah, it is. It's about taking that intentional action, isn't it? And actually not just having that plan. Plans are brilliant, but actually you do have to get out there, let people know what you're about, what you do, and that's when the results come in. So today we are going to delve into visibility and the importance of that, why it's super key, I guess how it's helped you grow as well. I think just sharing some of the things that you've maybe been doing will be really useful for the listeners as well.
Visibility is everything, and we'll be talking a lot today about podcasting because that's a major part of my journey. But the key things behind that are that you want to be successful in business, you want to be seen, you want to be heard, and crucially you need to be remembered, because if nobody actually knows what you stand for or what you represent and how you can help them or whoever it is you help, then you haven't got a business. And I think there's lots of people getting really visible, but actually forgetting to talk about their offers, forgetting to actually allude to their business. And they think it's obvious and it isn't.
No, we need to make it super clear, super easy for people, don't we? It's okay, so let's talk about podcasting then. So how did you get into the wonderful world of audio? Because you have an incredible story, which I think would be really interesting.
The story's so huge. And then I always have to condense it into this tiny little thing on a podcast. In a very short nutshell, about 11 years ago, I was told I wouldn't ever walk again. And I was an actor. So I used to do lots of theatre, very posh theatre, lots of Shakespeare and Ibsen and Chekhov, very posh stuff, all about the words. And so when I found out in my pregnancy that was the likely outcome, was that I wouldn't ever walk and I was going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, I really spiraled. I went down into this very dark hole, and I got to a point where I had to do something for my children. Actually, I wasn't even thinking about myself. I didn't think it was fair on them to have me just be this big blob stuck in a chair. And I had no idea that I could recover. But what I did is I went and saw a hypnotherapist who specialized in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, for those of you who don't know so much about the mindset world. And he showed me that I might be wrong about all the things I think about myself. So in terms of my recovery, what if the doctors were wrong and I could, in my body that they've never seen before, has the capacity to heal? What happens if I believed that? Would there be any negative effect on me if I believed that? And actually there wouldn't be. What would happen if, even if I was in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, but I could be a great mum, even in that wheelchair? What would happen if I could from home whilst looking after the children, be a well-paid performer. Because actually I had this belief behind it that as an actor, I couldn't be successful and earn good money. And I couldn't be a good mum if I was an actor. So actually I was sabotaging any success that I really wanted in that field. So he said, well, what would it look like if you could be at home with your children, be the kind of mum and be there as often as you want, never have to travel for auditions, and be world renowned for what you do. And I was kind of thinking at first, well, there isn't anything, that doesn't exist. But bit by bit, over the next couple of weeks, ideas started to drop into my head, and opportunities and doors that I would never have imagined were there. Suddenly I could see them. And what happened for me was I realized that I could become a voiceover artist. And then later I progressed to being a voice actor. Now, those terms might sound really similar, but in the acting world, they're completely different. And I found myself having something for myself that wasn't about being ill, that wasn't about being disabled, that wasn't about the children. And it gave me so much hope, so much excitement. And I basically learned, whilst completely and utterly laid up in bed, which is where the only place I ever was, how to edit, how to record, how to use a microphone, and how to do all these things. And the upshot of that is that it changed my life because I had something better to focus on, and my body began to heal. 6 years later, I was then winning awards around the UK, the US, internationally for my voiceover work, both as a performer and as an audio producer for audiobooks. And it was at that point I thought, well, then I'm done with this. I actually want to help more people know they can do anything. If I can go from wheelchair to Hollywood, then so can anybody else. And in terms of being known as the podcast queen, which is what people in the entrepreneurial space know me as now, it's only because I had that audio knowledge. And over time, people kept coming to me. As I'm saying, I want to talk to you about success and motivation and inspiration. People kept coming back and saying, how do I do my podcast? How do I record my audio? And it took me a little while, as you know, Sarah, to see the light and see the obvious that was sitting there before me. I was actually we were on a retreat together, weren't we?
Yeah,
we were talking about where am I going to go in the business? What am I going to do? And I can remember just having this moment of, it's so obvious that I take that space in podcasting for myself. It's so obvious. There's no one really leading the way in the UK. There's certainly no really strong woman leading the way in the UK or even the world. And it just became that, okay. And it actually, lots of things then fell together because I stopped saying my life used to be audio and now it's motivation. When I found how they work together and how that fitted together, the business just took off.
It's amazing. I mean, what a story. It's just so inspirational, isn't it? I think you can do anything is what it kind of comes to. It's knowing how to do it and what to do, and actually then taking the action, which is exactly what we said right at the beginning before you even shared your story. And I think you've then gone on to be really well recognized in that podcasting space. But had you not had that journey beforehand, had you not spent that time kind of taking action, learning about all of the audio stuff, that I think the combination of all of those different elements have kind of led you to where you are today. But also then that real kind of change point was you going out and telling the world, this is what I do, this is how I can help you, I'm in podcasting, I know what I can do because of all of this, all of that experience, all of that journey, all of that knowledge has enabled you to do what you're doing, but actually has enabled, hundreds of other people to be able to get their podcasts out as well.
Yeah, so we've now influenced my trainings, either in the podcast membership or consultancy and production that we have in the podcast agency, or as a result of my second book. I have now influenced over 300 podcasts in the last 2 years, this one included, which is quite nice. And I think what's important about that is that often we block our past history. We block the things that we actually have expertise in because we don't value it, because it's from the past. It's not the thing we want to do anymore. And I think actually both you and I have seen this in different ways. Often it's the things we have the knowledge that we've gained over years and years and years, coupled with the problems that we have overcome, the challenges that we have almost the failings that we've had and then pushed through, that's the most powerful way to teach. And particularly in the coaching industry or the entrepreneurial space, well, that's how you show people how to do it. And you can't do that right at the beginning because you haven't made all the cock-ups yet. But believe me, when you are ready to share from the things that went wrong, which is often after the scab has healed over, not from a bleeding wound, as it were, then there's so much in that. And I had this vision, actually, while I was in Hollywood that last time, that what I was supposed to be doing was helping get incredible, important messages out to the world. And I don't know where I had this vision that I was supposed to be doing that. And it was like there were leaders at the top of mountains. It sounds really, really odd, but leaders stood at the top of various mountain summits. And my job was to teach them how to use smoke signals. Now, at the time, I remember seeing like it was a powerful image. And so for me at that time, I thought I would be focused on being on stages myself, writing more books myself. But actually, my skill set in audio is the thing that has enabled me to do that. And that feels kind of cool. But like you say, it's about taking the action. At any point that along my journey, be it in audio or acting or when I first came into the motivational space, I was talking a lot more about visibility in general. And then in podcasting, every single time I have been very strong and clear in telling other people what I'm doing. I don't hide it until it's successful. I realize that sharing that I am now going to focus on this is the very thing that makes the success happen.
It is. It's sharing your journey as well, isn't it? Because I think so many people think they need to get to that finished article before they then start being able to help people or share things. The truth is that none of us will ever be the finished article because we're always on a journey. We're always evolving. And
when we're at that finished article, if you're anything like me, I'm already on to the next thing because that was old news. So why would you wait? And I do think I say this all the time. So my main podcast at the moment is Entrepreneurs Get Visible. And the key message in that, in fact, our tagline is anything's possible when you get visible. Anything that you want to achieve in your business, any recognition that you want to have, any associations you want to grow and connect with, that happens because of your own visibility. But it has to start with your own bravery first. That's the hard bit.
It is. It's that belief, isn't it? The belief in what you do can help people. And I think there's so much that, especially in, for female business owners, where there is always that feeling of self-judgment. We're so overcritical. We're so self-analytical to a certain extent as well. But when you can push through that and recognize that actually why you have set up your business is to help people, and those people cannot be helped if you don't get visible, that for me is always that kind of gear shift of going, actually, if I stay quiet, if I stay behind the scenes, those people that really do need my help are still going to be stuck. And it's just taking that much higher view, I think, and pushing yourself out there.
I think there's a couple of things about the wanting to help people part that actually felt quite uncomfortable for me at the start of my business, because the very first part of why I wanted it was because I wanted to make a big difference to my own family's life. Whatever businesses I've had, I've run loads of different businesses in my time. So it's okay to start from that money place first for your own needs.
Yeah.
Because if you can change your own life, change your own family's finances, then anything is possible. But often, actually, when we drop into it, we recognize that when I made that money, there's still something more important. I'm going to want to feel that I've achieved something much more than that.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, as I'm kind of in these entrepreneurial spaces more and more, is that the sooner you can get in touch with what the meaningful part of your business really is, then you're more likely to come up with an offer that people really want, because it speaks to them as well and their needs. And it's so interesting because I don't know about you, but I came initially from a place of, well, what do I think people want? What can I sell them to make them want to buy? And actually, if you come from that place, the energy's wrong.
Yeah, it always is. It always is. And I think so many people, whatever kind of niche, whatever industry, whatever qualifications you've done, it's the twisting it into actually, what do you want as a person? What lights you up? How, even just the type of person that you want to work with, it all has to come from you within, because we get so frustrated with when we attract people who actually aren't our ideal clients, or we
Yes.
do something that is energetically off, or
Yep.
it has to feel aligned to you. So I think you're right. It always starts with what you want, whether that's financially, whether that's lifestyle, who you want to help. That is the absolute foundation. I talk about that a lot. And I think it's then going, okay, putting all of that into place, I can then come up with all these offerings. But actually, if it doesn't fit my lifestyle, or if it's not going to enable me to bring the money coming in, that's still going to feel off. So what can I put out there that enables me to hit my goals, my needs, but also still helps the people that I want to help? So it's definitely that kind of two-stage approach, I think.
It is. Having said that, you also need to just get started. So if you're right at the start of your business, you have to get enough experience under your belt, enough testimonials, enough case studies to be sharing with others so that people trust you. So one is the visibility, and the other is trust because of your own personal confidence, which I think comes through how you talk about your work. I think it's very different knowing you could do that work and actually having got the results from doing that work. It's different things. I think you talk about things in different ways. And from there, really, that you can then grow. You can't, and for anyone who's out there thinking, well, whatever I'm charging at the moment, I'm never going to have the lifestyle I want because I can't charge anymore. Well, yes, you can, but not yet. You can, but not yet. You've got to do the groundwork. You've got to build that trust, build that authority. And that's actually what visibility is all about. It's about having more people know what you do. The more people know, the more credibility you have, the more referrals come your way. But it all starts with you believing that you can. And every single time. That's all it is.
Mindset's a massive part of it. We both know that one.
Yeah.
We both
And actually,
experienced that as well.
I talk a lot about my first bit's called Get Visible. And a lot of it is about, the push, the outward. How do we get more social media? How do we get seen here? How do we do that? But it actually has to start with you seeing yourself. You have to see that light inside you. You have to switch that light on and say, actually, I'm here and I deserve to be. And even if I'm right at the start, that's okay. I'm not dimming this light, and seeing your own potential first. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so interesting from us both having to learn to walk again in completely different aspects, but that mindset at really what was quite a young age for both of us has just enabled us in different ways to kind of grow our businesses and help people in different ways. But it's always come back to that mindset of, if you believe in that and you can do it. And I still have those wobbles, and we all do, don't we? I think it's a completely natural thing. Every time you sort of grow in different spaces and do something different, all of that kind of comes back again, and it's just knowing how to push through.
Absolutely. And that's an interesting thing. The longer you're in the entrepreneurial and kind of online worlds, the more you'll come across people saying, well, it's all about your mindset. It's all about your mindset. And then you'll come across loads of people who are then qualified as coaches or NLP or hypnotherapists or healers. And you think, well, they must have it sorted then. They must be all fine for them. Maybe once I've dealt with my mindset, that's the done deal. But it isn't, because you're pushing those boundaries and stretching yourself. I get this all the time. As you know, Sarah, I've had some really challenging family circumstances over the last 6 months. And I've had to dig deep on some days to remember, okay, I'm doing this because it makes a difference. I'm doing my business because I'm giving back. I'm doing it because it means something. And I'm good enough to forge further on. Because I think when you have things in your personal life that really affect you, you can start to doubt yourself, because everything goes off kilter. Maybe you don't look after yourself well enough. Maybe you're not getting up early enough to exercise or journal. That's just been me this week, actually. I made my just this week I've been saying, oh, I'm going to get up and exercise, and then hadn't. And then this morning I had to do it, because that's the choice I have to make. If I want to be more switched on, if I want to feel better in my life, I have to choose it first and get myself out of bed.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, I'm talk about this quite recently on the podcast as well, about kind of habits, and healthy habits, but also high performance habits, in the sense of actually for you to and your business to achieve the levels that you want to, you have to be operating at your optimal level. And when things happen in our personal lives, that can throw it. It really tests us. And quite often it's the first thing to go from people's, days or to-do lists or whatever, because we drop that self-care because we think that that can be dropped. Whereas actually it's probably the thing that needs to stay there and be the non-negotiable, because we all need our stress release. We all need our ways to release everything else that's going on personally or frustrations in business. And if we can keep that and maintain a certain level of that, that will enable us to be, more creative, more effective, but also I think just more aware of what the impact is. Whereas if we lose that in a it's all sorts of things. It's kind of, it's linked to our self-worth, our confidence, let alone the actual physical, mental health side of things as well. So it helps us make better decisions, whether it's business or personal. But it's so hard. I think, especially over the last 18 months or so, everyone's boundaries have been tested to the extreme of having really personal things. But that can become hard.
Yeah, I've got 2 teenagers and an 11-year-old in the house, and my boundaries have definitely been shifted. And I was just saying to my husband last night, we don't have bedtimes in our house anymore. They're just often I will go to bed after at least 2 of the children. So I noticed that I hadn't sat down to watch what I want to watch on Netflix on my own. I'd always had someone with me, and it's not the same. And I think we constantly have to reevaluate, well, am I looking after myself, and what are the thoughts that are coming up for me again and again? So if I'm noticing that I'm feeling a bit resentful, I don't have time on my own, well, no, it's no one else's job to fix that. It's my job. It's my job.
Totally. Definitely.
And I think this follows through into, if you notice that you're having real challenges in your business, and maybe you think it's because your assistant isn't helping you well enough, or you've got a problem with someone else or whatever. It's not. It's about, where are you stepping up? Because when you're focused and when you've looked after yourself, you can deal with those challenges in a much healthier and quicker way. And sometimes you actually do need to give yourself that switch off time from everything else in order to allow yourself to grow and evolve, and notice what your business is saying to you. Notice that you are the block, because we are every time there's a problem in the business, it's us.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think even just that, taking that sort of emotional bit out of it, if you can do, taking a little bit what I call a CEO approach to your business, of kind of going, okay, well, actually, what is going on here, trying to look at things objectively. But I love that idea of just listening to those repeating thoughts, because they do keep repeating and they might come back in different ways. But if we take notice of that, then we can be aware of it and then start taking action, which is, again, goes back to that taking action side of things. And when we feel off kilter, that often affects how we show up, and that visibility piece comes back in again, that we quite often pull back from the world because we don't feel like showing up, we don't feel like putting things out there. And then it has a knock-on effect on our business, which then has a knock-on effect on our confidence. And it just becomes this kind of spiral. So it always loops back to the healthy business, which is exactly my kind of thing of, it's the healthy, not just the profitable, sustainable side of things, but it's looking after you. And the more you can do that, the more you will want to show up, the more confidence you have. And I think, that is a huge part of it. One thing that I wanted to kind of talk about was obviously visibility can come in all sorts of different ways, and podcasting is something that you really specialize in. And if someone's kind of listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, that's just another thing to add to my to-do list, how on earth can I fit that into my day? Or, it's a way of trying to be visible, trying to get myself out there when I just find social media too much in itself. How do I do something else? How do I add that in? I know we've had this conversation before of just actually, it comes back to that mindset thing again, doesn't it? So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's about understanding how influential podcasting is right now. It's very of the moment, and yet will continue to become much more influential. And if you're ever at that point where, you're putting all the content out on social media, you're doing the lives, you're not seeing the results, well, a lot of that content that you're creating, its value has actually lessened or disappeared within 24 hours. And what's clever about podcasting is that everything you create has potential lifetime of 7 years if you do it properly in the first place. And so I know for me, yes, my business will evolve in 7 years, but I'm still going to want a personal brand. I'm still going to want to be recognized for the things I'm doing now. They're still going to be an important part of my history. So when I know that I can have more reach through podcasting and it's going to last a lot longer, why wouldn't I come into this space? I was actually at a conference a couple of weeks ago where it was a big content marketing conference. And they'd finished just doing a report on the most effective forms of marketing, what's working right now and what isn't. And some of the things that were coming up were quite interesting. So TikTok advertising is the thing, the hottest paid advertising. But the most influential free organic marketing strategy right now is podcasting. And it's 14 times more effective than any other organic marketing at the moment. 14 times.
That's amazing.
If it's done in the right way. If it's done in the right way. And that's the difference. So anyone could start a podcast by picking up their phone, getting a free podcast app and having it live, talking into the phone, having it live in 2 hours. That is not going to help you grow your business or your credibility. And what I've really worked with people to do over the last couple of years is build the business so it's the way people find you. Podcasts actually work very similarly to search engines, to Google. And actually now Google has its own podcasting platform. It has the ability to read the content of a podcast as well. So maybe you're not ready to have your own show, but you might want to dip your toe in the water being a guest on a semi-regular basis. If every time you are a guest, you talk about the same kind of topics and there's some keywords or keyword short, do they call them keyword tails, long keyword tails?
The terms.
If you're saying those terms because it's your topic of influence, that's going to affect your Google ranking. The other thing is that there isn't another platform where you can easily bring on people much more influential than you and people with much bigger audiences than you because they want to get in front of your audience. You become a media channel. And the amount of money that changes hands as a result of podcast guesting and podcast hosting is astonishing because of collaborations that happen, friendships that blossom, deals that are done, people become each other's clients on both sides of the table as a result of the conversations that they have. Because I think gone are the days when anyone's wanting to really go to a lunchtime networking meeting. It's not happening. The conversations are happening on podcasts. So for me, if you knew that you could get in front of a much wider audience, but a specific audience, potentially globally, with content you create once that doesn't have to be very long and could actually have been a Facebook Live in the first place as well, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, and I think it's the way you can repurpose the content as well, that actually you can create something once, whether it's doing as an interview, whether it's doing a solo episode, if you have your own, or, as you were saying, kind of the conversations that you're having as a guest expert, the content that's then created off the back of it, if it's done correctly, that becomes your social media content as well. So you're not duplicating your time, you're not duplicating your effort. You can actually be really smart in the way that you use and create across many, many multiple different platforms.
Yeah, everything starts from the podcast. So it might be, in my case, I would always think podcast first, but I might live deliver that podcast that would go across LinkedIn, Facebook pages, Facebook groups, YouTube. We'd then download that audio. It would go up onto all of the podcasting platforms, but we'd create show notes from it. And show notes are a little bit like a mini blog. So you wouldn't have to then write a blog on your website to get SEO and search engine terms. You can take things that you've said and turn them into quote graphics. So you've got your Instagram grid sorted because you've already said it out loud. You're not having to go and find someone else's quote. It's actually stuff you have said. And also, if you do have guests or you're a guest on someone else's show, the opportunities to then piggyback off each other's audiences it's like nothing else. There's nothing else like it right now.
Yeah, and I love the fact that I can have conversations with people who I wouldn't normally have conversations with. Not so much
Mhm.
you, but the conversations that I've had with other people have just been amazing. And because it's a longer conversation than a networking group where you're constantly, you're being interrupted, someone's trying to sell something or whatever, you can really get into quite a bit of depth and get to understand that person, how they
Yeah.
work, potential collaborations, and that becomes exciting as well. So it becomes a platform for you to then move into something else.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one aspect, is the return on investment with the relationship between guesting and hosting. But the other more obvious return on investment is through what happens to the listener. So people will often say to me, well, if I'm hosting a podcast and maybe it's costing me some money to host this podcast, why am I doing that? What's the benefit? How do I monetize it? Now, you could go on and have things like sponsorship or affiliate deals. But actually, if you're doing it for business, my belief is that first and foremost, you want to deliver great content to give extra value, to develop trust. And when you develop trust in the depth of your content, when you then are really selling on your podcast or bringing people into your world, they know you so much more. So very often the way it will work is someone would find me, for example, on someone's podcast. And then underneath, my podcast would be their recommended listen, or all the other places where I've been a guest would be a recommended listen. So people will jump from one to another if they like someone's voice, if they like someone's energy, if they like their story and they're intrigued. And so then someone would come in and binge listen to my podcast, maybe 3, 4, 5, 20, 25, 75 even episodes. And then who's someone going to buy from? If someone wanted to learn about podcasting, would they go to a competitor that they've never heard from? Or would they go to the person who has been with them in the shower? I'm going to say, whilst they're listening to a podcast, while they've been in the shower, in the dog walk, doing the school run, whatever, doing their makeup in the morning while they did the washing up. Well, I know who I would be more likely to purchase from. And again, the stats around this are mind-blowing. People are 81% more likely to purchase from you if they have listened to your podcast content.
It's amazing.
So
It's such a huge stat, isn't it? I want to pick up on something there actually around not just the shower, but the way that people listen and sort of building on that kind of the shift in how people consume media has completely changed over the last year and a half, partly because of COVID, but also people's ways of commuting, people being at home a lot more. There isn't so much of the watching video. It's so much more audio because people are not necessarily multitasking, but they're doing it. They're listening whilst they're, as you say, out walking the dog or doing the washing up. And you can't do any of those things if you're watching video. And I think that's the interesting bit, is that you can have someone in your ear and talking to you. You get to know them, you get to build that relationship. And then you want more of that. It's it becomes quite continuous, that relationship, I think then.
we always say that podcasting reaches the parts that other media can't. When you can't watch a video if you've got your hands in soapy water, you can't, because people tend to consume video by scrolling. And often if we're looking at video on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, we're expecting to scroll quickly. So if you get someone on a video to the 10% mark of your video, you've done really well. But on a podcast, most people listen to 85 to 100% of a podcast episode, no matter how long it is. So you have people's attention for longer. And that's where you really have influence. And we see so much money coming into the podcasting space from the likes of Spotify and Stitcher and Apple and Amazon. They're all coming into the podcast space because they see so much money on the table, because the host of a podcast becomes so influential to a niche specific audience. On average, people are listening to, if they are a podcast listener, they're listening on average to 6 episodes a week.
Wow.
From different shows. So 6 episodes in total. In the UK at the moment, it's about a third of the country who listen to 6 episodes a week. And we are really behind the rest of the world. We will catch up. So America is just under 50% of the country now, post-lockdown. And Sweden has just hit 64% of the country are listening to 6 episodes of the podcast a week. So this isn't something to ignore. If you're not a podcast listener yet yourself, don't just think it's that little thing, that odd little app that you've never really listened to. This is actually the place where people are exploding their personal brands. And there's nothing like it. In 3 years' time, it's expected that everyone who has a website for business will just have to have a podcast.
That's
in the
amazing,
same way
isn't it?
that 10 years ago, suddenly every man and his dog had a blog. And so why would you wait?
Yeah. And I think, for me, since I started this podcast, and we're only, not quite hitting 30 episodes, but actually it's hitting people across the world. And there's listeners in Australia, New Zealand, Germany, the States, let alone the UK. Would I have ever hit those people had I not done the podcast? Probably not. Yes, although it might have taken time, but actually it's a different way of attracting potentially a slightly different audience that you can draw into. And that is a huge part of being visible. If you want to have that impact and you want to, grow your audience in a different way, podcasting enables you to do that. And I think, people who are listening to this now and thinking, if podcasting is an opportunity, an option for them to kind of go into, as you said, you don't need to go in and sort of set your own up straight away. You can get into it by being a guest expert. And actually, that is one of the quickest ways to grow your audience, is by tagging on the back of somebody else's audience, not as in taking advantage of it, but actually using that as an opportunity to go, okay, there's an audience that would definitely be my ideal client, not from a competing perspective. You don't want to necessarily step on competitors' toes, but actually they are right there, that that you can support them, that you can give value to them and help them. And pitching yourself to that is a great opportunity for you and for your business.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is a really great way to get started in this field. I'm really curious though to ask you, so this is around episode 30. Why did it take you a little while to start with a podcast? And what difference has it made to you now that you have it?
Oh, that's a great question. I love how you're interviewing me back on this one.
I do it all the time. People hate it.
It took me a little bit of time. I guess there was that fear of doing something new, of the fact that it would add more time to my business when I felt like I was in the opposite way, where I felt like I had a lack of time. What became really clear to me though, and one of the reasons that sort of catapulted me into just getting on and doing it, was through lockdown, because I couldn't show up at specific times when I wanted to go live, because I was homeschooling, and my children, when we first went into lockdown, were really young. So, I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at that time, and there was no way that I felt comfortable, part of a fear maybe, but I didn't want to be going live with them kind of just knocking what I was talking about. That's just not how I get into flow. What I could do with a podcast though, was I could record that when they were out or when they were asleep, and in a way that worked for me, so I could still deliver to my audience and help them in a time when I knew they needed help, but I wasn't able to do it in the ways that I wanted to. So that was probably that kind of major catalyst. But actually, what it's done for me, and the realization, is that I should have done it a lot longer ago, because it's then created all that extra content for me. And it's then, I love planning, and I love kind of knowing what's coming up, because then it means that I can tweak things, change things. And the podcast has been part of that plan, because it has enabled me to use whatever it is that I'm selling, or whatever it is that I'm kind of working on, to be able to either use that as a way of marketing, but also enable to increase the value that I can give to people. The other huge part of it is that I've been able to have some amazing conversations with people that have actually led to some really interesting opportunities, which haven't yet come to light because we're still working through things. But there's some really exciting things on the horizon that potentially I would never have got to know about, or never even been in that person's space. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, twofold, threefold, fourfold, however many you want to look at it. But
there's almost like this inner world of podcasting where once you have a podcast, people who are podcasting already take you seriously a little bit more. It's the same with a book. If you have your book, you stand behind what is in the book. And the same effect happens with the podcast. Podcast hosts are always wanting to talk to other podcast hosts because they know you understand about bringing value, about how to be in a podcast interview, that you're going to have decent quality because it's going to matter to you as well. And that's really interesting. And I think if you see anyone that you see really doing well in the podcast, in the online entrepreneurial space right now, are either hosting their own show or have been guesting for a little while. And that's how one of the reasons that they've become so well connected.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, network, there is that quote, isn't there, that your network is your net worth. And I think there is a big part of that it's not just the collaborations, but if you can give value to other people and that is well received, that opens up so many more opportunities, because people get used to you speaking on as that whether that's on stage or whether that's in other podcast episodes or guesting, that you have that certain level of credibility, for a certain word, that actually you are, especially as you were saying earlier around, if you become renowned for a certain subject and you are talking about a similar topic each time you go onto a podcast as a guest, you get well known for that, and that just builds up that authority, that credibility, and that huge trust factor, which we know is all important.
And your ease in which you can talk about it as well, that comes through going on podcasts and being in flow, actually being in the conversation, because you don't know what's coming next, but you do know what you want to talk about, and not in a kind of, no matter what's said, I'm going to say my piece. That you learn to bring out elements of your expertise through what is discussed. So that's interesting. That's very nice to hear. What's the thing that's most surprised you then about it in terms of your visibility?
Nothing in certain respects, because I think I always knew that it was going to be a platform that I wanted to be in. So I think what surprised me, I suppose, was, if I'm really honest, was that I got to number 1 within the marketing charts. And I did that in 24, maybe 36 hours. That was amazing, because it gave me that reassurance, that confidence that actually what I was putting out there was well received, was needed to a certain extent. Because in all honesty, you never know quite whether, how things are going to land, whatever it is that you're putting out there. So even just from that, again, that trust factor, but it being reinforced back to you by your audience, is always a really lovely thing, I think. But yeah, I'm going to throw that back to you as well, actually. It's what surprised you about this industry, as you've been in it for
So I've been podcasting now for about 4.5 years. Yeah. Obviously, I came from the audio space, and I started my first podcast, although I knew about the audio, pretty cluelessly. And I didn't understand how to use it for my business. What surprised me, and we knew it was going to grow. We knew the industry was going to grow and become influential. What surprised me was the speed at which that happened at the beginning of 2020. So it had been earmarked that, or had been suggested that we would go from about 800,000 podcasts at the end of 2019. We'd expected to double that within the year, within a 12-month period. And what happened was we'd actually done that within about 4 months, because we went into lockdown. And an astonishing amount of, I think it was something like 400,000 podcasts went live between the end of February 2020 and the tail end of April 2020. 400,000 podcasts. But that's across the world, across every language, country, because there was suddenly this real need for connection.
Yeah.
And a real desire, this is where I get a bit tingly when I talk about this, a real desire for those that had some knowledge or insights or experience in helping guide people in some way, be that in relationships, mindset, wealth, coping strategies suddenly had to get that message out there really quickly. Yeah. And those who needed help suddenly needed to find that help. So what we saw was not only this explosion in the amount of content available, but in the hours that were being consumed and in the way it was consumed. So suddenly, instead of it being something quite private where people were listening in the car or while they were commuting, it became something that was consumed on smart speakers in the home. It became the companion while you were working. And those things aren't going away at all. And yeah, I think podcasts had a very important part to play in keeping people sane.
Yeah.
In the pandemic.
And almost it was that sort of conversation with someone. It was that real person that was speaking, that wasn't more media. I think that was the other thing that kind of happened through lockdown, is that everyone got kind of Zoom fatigue and, video, everything was on video and video conferences, meetings and things, and still wanted to have that connection, but not necessarily with that screen in front of them. And the audio world enabled that.
And what interests me about that is we know that 7% of the communication we give is our words, actually the language we use. But when you remove the visual element, your ears and your subconscious are picking up so many external clues, things you're not always aware of. The pattern of someone's speech, the timbre, the pitch, the rhythm. You know when they're speaking truth. You know when they're doing the top level surface stuff, and you know when it's something that's actually a little bit meaningful and deep, and you can hear when people are in their truth and when they're hiding. And people actually really like to hear the stumbles, the pauses, where someone breathed, where someone giggled, where someone, whatever it is, you don't have to be polished. Yes,
it's
you need your
life,
audio quality. Yeah, it's real life. And I think a lot of media that we consume is so rigid, whereas this allows so much fluidity and normalcy. You see?
There you go.
I can't say, I'm going to say normalness. I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Normality,
now.
maybe normality.
That'll be the one.
Oh, amazing. What I love to do, so one of the questions that I do ask my guests, and I love having fluid conversations that isn't prescriptive at all, because I think we get much more out of it. But one of the questions that I do love to ask is, what does a healthy business mean to you? And I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Healthy business is manifold. It's when you are bringing in more than enough money to make sure you pay yourself. So very often people are fixated on how much they've brought in. But if you're not looking after how much you spend and whether you can afford to invest again in whatever you need to invest in for your business, then it's unhealthy. The other thing that I've become very mindful of over the last couple of years is if you feel that you constantly have to be on, then that is not a healthy place to be. The more you can grow in having long form content like podcasts, like pre-recorded video, even all sorts of things that are done, batch recorded and done, so that you can actually have some time off but nobody notices. It's so important, because there are way too many, particularly female entrepreneurs, who are approaching in or coming through burnout. And that is, for me, is not the life I came in here to do.
Yeah.
You have to look at what your model of success is. For me, it's being able to drop everything at the drop of a hat for my children, my family, should they need it. And as I was saying, I've been through a really challenging period. So it's up to me to take responsibility to make sure my business is healthy without me having to be constant. So how can you do that?
I love that. It speaks to my ears and to my heart as well. It's something that I'm really passionate about. I mean, I know we've had lots of conversations off air about the importance of looking after ourselves when family situations arise. And I think, again, this last year and a half has pushed our boundaries in so many different ways. People have changed the ways they've worked, but we need to do that without compromising our health, because if we go down, the business goes down if you don't have the right business model, and your family goes down because you're not there to support them in the ways that you want to and feel that you need to. And it's so entwined. One of the things that I hear people talk a lot about is this work-life balance. And I just don't think that is there or should be even a term. Like, whatever happens in our life is what we're living, and a business is part of that. And it's not one or the other. It's so entwined, especially as, female business owners, because whatever happens in our business affects our life. Whatever happens in our life is going to affect our business. It's not one or the other. It has to be, thought about holistically from that perspective of how are we going to make this work, and how are you going to enjoy that as well, without the burnout, without the overwhelm.
Who wants a business that is all about burnout? Nobody
does.
It's up to you to sort it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes through in so many different ways. And I think what we've been speaking about today is that actually visibility is key in having that business that continues to grow and you continue to put yourself out there. But podcasting allows you to do that without you having to be, I'm going to use your term here, without you having to be on all the time, because that enables you to have that flexibility, enables you to batch record, enables you to, do all the things that you want to do, but still be visible, still connect with your audience, still support them, giving value. So I'd love to kind of finish with just some top tips, really, from your perspective on getting visible. Obviously, podcasting is going to be a big part of that, but some top tips for people who are running their business and maybe struggling to be visible or wanting to get more visible.
You have to be really aware of who you're actually trying to reach and what they need to know most. Not what you're trying to sell them. That's always got to be in the back of your mind. But what are the emotional blocks for them? Because the more you speak to that emotion and the more you show up as the person who fixes that specific problem, the more people will turn to you, recommend you. If you haven't got clarity in what you offer and who it's for, there's no point doing the rest of the social media stuff. So the clearer you can be, as though you're speaking to a 5-year-old, the more you can show up and deliver value, be it on an Instagram live, but that it tells people what you're going to tell them. It's not just you showing up and waffling. That maybe you batch record 1-minute videos, but every single one is value packed. When you do podcast episodes, it's not just a really nice chit chat. There's value as well. And when you think about everything you're putting out there, not as, oh my God, I've got to do another social media post, or I've got to send another email, or I've got to do another podcast episode, but how can the thing I'm about to do be the answer to the problem that they have right now? And the more you do that, the easier the visibility thing becomes, because like you said right at the beginning, it's not really about you, it's about them. It's about that place of service.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved having a deeper chat with you about all things podcasting and visibility, and appreciate that you are super busy. So thank you again. And where can people find you if they are wanting to, come and see where you're at and what you do?
I'm only ever going to say go and listen to my podcast. So I'm not sure when this one's going out, but Entrepreneurs Get Visible is my main podcast. And depending on when you listen, my new podcast, which is called Podcasting for Entrepreneurs, which does what it says on the tin, should be out as well as of the 2nd of November.
Amazing. Yes, we will definitely be live at a similar time. So thank you again. Been brilliant to chat to you. Hope you have all enjoyed listening to this, and I will see you on the next episode.